ERG leader burnout is real, and one of the biggest reasons for ERG leader burnout is that they end up doing all of the work themselves. And the reason for that is they don't have the right people around them. They don't have the right leadership structure. The committee's not right. They've got a lot of people that are just coming to the room, talking, 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 not doing anything, and they're left doing everything. So if you're in that situation, then this is the video for you. I'm going to talk about how to build that right committee. This is ERG Strategy, the channel that gives you tips, tools, techniques, and strategies to build effective, engaged employee resource groups and employee networks that actually make a difference. New videos every Tuesday. I'm trying my best, people. And every Friday I'll go live, 8:30 on a Friday morning, UK time, on LinkedIn and also here on YouTube. So if that's what you're interested in, you are in the right place. Now, when we did some research last year, this was ranked as the number one factor for ERG success is having the right committee around you. Nothing else, nothing to do with budget. I know a lot of people often say that, oh, we haven't got enough budget. Not even if you've got an exec sponsor that's not pulling their weight, right? This, having a strong committee, was ranked as the number one factor to success. So this is where we're going to start. And I'm doing a little series of 4 videos just talking about, I guess, some ERG fundamentals like ERG 101. And this is where we're starting, how to structure the committee, because it's so important. So I want to start off with how many people, because I came across a client recently who in their organization, they have some really big committees, and I'm talking like double digits. When we did our research about what the optimum size was, most committees are definitely fewer than 10 people. So it's definitely between 6 and 10. And I would say the optimum size is around 7 to 8 committed people. That does depend on the complexity and the size of your organization, right? I know that some ERGs are huge, right? I know that you are like organizations within an organization. So in some of those, because of the complexity, you have more numbers. But to be honest, even when I think about some of the best run companies that I can think of, the boards are not huge, right? There might be some complexity within the structure, but the board themselves are not huge. So I'd say if you're into double digits, you got too many people. Right, so 7 to 8 people is a great number. Obviously, just in terms of co-chairs, I use the term co-chair and not chair, there should be at least 2 of you so that you're not the only one pulling the weight. So even if this was your idea, this ERG was your idea, I'm going to get another video. I'm going to do another video about how to set up an ERG, but having more than one co-chair is necessary. And then still within that 7 to 8, including you and your co-chair, no more than 7 to 8 of you on the committee, right, of doers. So what are some of the essential roles? Okay, so the roles that we typically see is, as well as the co-chairs, we typically have a comms person that is responsible for things like newsletter, but also if you've got an event, they're the person that's maybe doing flyers or doing graphics, etc. So you typically have a comms person. You then typically also have an events person. Now, if you know me for long enough and if I've delivered training at your organization, you'll know how I feel about this events role. It can sometimes become a solution looking for a problem, as in the answer isn't necessarily always we need events, 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 events. But if you give somebody that role, that is what you're going to end up with, right? Lots of events. So events is another role. Sometimes I see somebody having the role of treasurer. So those are some of the core roles that I often see. Sometimes if it's bigger, I see roles like membership or member engagement. So somebody effectively almost just like managing that process of like onboarding new members, or, managing where members are sitting. For example, if they're sitting in a Teams group or in Viva Engage, or, it's like a newsletter sign up or whatever it be. And also potentially managing member engagement, or if members are reaching out to the team. What are some of the other roles that I see? The roles that I prefer to see, if I just get onto that really quickly, I actually prefer it when a network decides what its priorities and plans are, and then determines the roles. And I really like it when the roles are driven by specific areas of work or focus. That's my preference. So for example, if as a network you are tackling, for example, a particular policy. So if you are, say, the parents and carers network, and you want to look at the carers leave policy, paid and unpaid leave for carers, I would rather see a role in your committee that is the lead for input into that policy. I mean, obviously, as networks, we don't write policy, right? Because there are people in the business that are paid to write policy. But I love it when in the committee you have the leads for key pieces of work, or it might be that just you have a lead which is policy review that sits within the committee, depending again on size and complexity. And then if there is something else, so for example, if the HR team or the learning and development team have reached out to you to collaborate on a new development program, you may have somebody who for that year, for example, within the committee, their role is, leadership development or development programs. Or if HR have asked you to get involved in recruitment, you might have somebody that's a recruitment lead. So that's my preference. My preference is don't create a role unless there is actually a priority for that year based on data and evidence that you want to support. That for me is the better way, rather than having like a kind of cookie cutter version of we're going to have one of these and one of these and one of these. And then, they don't necessarily end up being fully utilized, right? Especially when it comes into things like the impact of the network. You don't necessarily need some of these standard kind of like playbook cookie cutter type roles. So that would be my first watch out, basically. I'm not going to get into the role of the co-chair. I'll do that in another video. I'll go into a lot of detail because I know sometimes that is quite a common question. What is your role as the co-chair? There are specific roles. Now I'll go into that. Maybe I'll do a specific video. If you want me to do a specific video on the role of each of these, the actual responsibilities of each of these roles, maybe put something in the comments and I'll do that, especially the role of the co-chair, because I know that often is a question as well. And then I want to talk about the importance of the exec sponsor. Now, sometimes the exec sponsor is assigned, so it's given to you and you don't have that much choice. And sometimes the exec sponsors are great and sometimes they're not so great, right? So there is something about what I always say is if you are new, so if you're a new network, it's a great opportunity potentially to seek out the sponsor that you would like, do a little bit of digging, go and have a few conversations and mention to a few senior leaders and see if there is a senior leader that actually you would quite like to have as your exec sponsor, and make the case to both them and also to your people team or your DI lead, whoever is leading that process. Have that conversation with them. Also, if you're in a position where maybe your exec sponsor has left the business or stepped down, or there's a little bit of a reshuffle going on, again, perfect time to get your bid in, right, for the exec sponsor that you want. If you do happen to have ended up with an exec sponsor that maybe isn't the best or isn't the most active, or just happens to have a lot on in terms of their day job within the business, then you potentially need to find another senior leader that can, or several, like potentially actually senior leaders who can act as like informal champions or informal sponsors for you. They don't need to necessarily carry that title, but if, for example, you are putting on an event and you need a senior leader to kind of like, turn up and say a few words or whatever, they might be that person. But if you have got specific initiatives where, for example, you're getting involved in policy or business improvement or process, that senior leader could be your sounding board or the person that makes other introductions into other areas of the departments, into other areas or other departments of the business on your behalf. So think about those kind of like informal executive sponsors as well as just your formal one. And then the one thing that I want to finish off with, sitting outside of your committee, I talk about having a power team. This is something I've been talking about for a while, right, for networks. And this to me is, these are the people that are going to support you and help you to get things done that don't necessarily sit in your committee. So just outside of the committee. And there are 4 areas that I'm going to talk about. First of all, the DEI team or the inclusion team or the culture team or the employee engagement team, depending on where it sits. But if you don't have somebody that's formally assigned to employee networks, and I know that not all organizations do that, you definitely need to build relationships with somebody in that team, because they are the team that are responsible for the data and the metrics around inclusion and employee engagement. And so actually you want to kind of become friends with that team so that you can influence things like employee surveys. You want it to be easier to get hold of data. You kind of want to be working hand in hand with that team. So if at all possible, you want to kind of get to know them, build up a relationship, become friends with them, right? Because this is like these are your allies in the trenches. Okay, so first of all, we've got the DI team. Then I've got like the people team or HR and other teams that sit within that. So things like the resourcing team, for example. These are the teams where if you want to make a real difference in terms of some of the really kind of like bigger goals and bigger purposes that networks exist. So things like retention, things like progression in the organization, things like development and career advancement. And we were talking about, the example of development programs. This is the team that you need to influence and work with. So finding, kind of like a couple of friends that you can create in that team that you can go to, that you can work with on specific projects and initiatives, and use them again as a sounding board is really key. Otherwise, actually, you're actually going to find a lot of barriers and obstacles and blockers if you are not working collaboratively with the people team. The third team that I've got is comms. Now, marketing or comms, right? And the reason that I have comms in there is they can really help you in terms of they can help you with big events. So some of you may know I often talk about when it comes to events, I would rather you just have like one flagship event for the whole year, right? That you can get some comm support for. And that's the ideal. I mean, the ideal is that whoever is responsible for network, so for example, somebody in the DI team actually speaks to the comms team and arranges for somebody within that team to support all of the networks with their hero or flagship events. But that doesn't always happen. So if it doesn't happen, you need a comms person in your power team. So you're going to go and make friends with somebody in comms, right? You're going to go and like use your influencing skills and your relationship building skills, and you're going to make friends with somebody in comms where they can support you with a little bit of resource, whether that be around things like newsletters or getting access to things like distribution lists and things like that, and or data that you need. It could be site data or whatever it be, but that person will become invaluable in terms of taking some of the workload off you as a network. And this is why you don't necessarily need a kind of like full-time comms lead role if you can build this relationship really well and get this within somebody else's day job where they're supporting you as a network. That really is the key. And then the final one, in your power team, somebody from IT, right? Somebody from the IT, help desk or service desk or whatever it is you want to call it, because they're the people that are going to help you with things like, your shared inbox settings. They may also own things like, shared folders or things in Microsoft Teams or Viva Engage or whatever it be, right? But you just often need that person in IT that's going to help you. And certainly when I was running transformation programs, when I would go into an organization, one of the first kind of this power team that I was looking for was IT. I mean, I could add a few on there. So I could add on, for example, finance, who can help you, having somebody that can help you with things like a business case or understanding when things like the forecast and budget processes happen. Again, if you haven't got that central support through DEI, you can sometimes get some of that support through finance, and also procurement as well. So especially if you haven't got a sort of agreed route by which you're procuring things like speakers or even small amounts of spend, knowing somebody in procurement that can like handhold you through the process, again, is really useful. So that's it in terms of power teams. That's like beyond your committee structure. I really hope that was useful just in terms of like building the right team around you so that you're not burning out and you're not, kind of like just going around and expending a lot of energy and not seeing results. Because I think if you really do know how to structure your committee and get the right people around you, and also if you know how to build your power team, and I mean, I didn't include in your power team the exec assistants, right? The EAs, I mean, fount of all knowledge and very close to like the power base when it comes to like getting things done. But if you can have all of these right people around you and the right roles around you and that senior support, it can make your lives so much easier. So what I would say is if you have already got a committee, just stand back and have a look at it. Have you got the right people around you? Have you got people that are action oriented, or have you just got a team full of people that come together just to have a bit of a whinge? That is not what you want. You want people that come to the room and actually take action. So what kind of people are you missing? What roles you may be missing? What are your biggest priorities? And actually, how could you restructure your committee so that it really reflects priorities and taking action, rather than just people that want to come and have a chit chat and a cup of tea and a cupcake. And that's it. So next in this series, I am going to be talking about how to choose the right name for your employee resource group, or if you're rebranding, how to rebrand it for maximum impact and maximum buy-in. That's it for today, folks. I will see you next time. Ciao.